How many of you grew up feeling as though you were the problem child? That you were the burden, you were causing all of the chaos and all of the problems. The finger was always pointed at you, that you were doing something wrong, or that you were one of the biggest, if not the biggest reason why the family was having so many struggles. I was that child, and if you're watching this video, you probably were too. If you clicked on this, it's probably because on some level this was your experience too. And what I want to talk about today is, what it's like growing up as that child, what it's like growing up feeling as though there's something seriously wrong with you and that you're causing pain and suffering to the people around you. And what I'm not going to do in this video is, shame and bash parents. What I experienced in my own life and working as a mental health counselor, what I see with so many people is that it's not that the parent didn't love the child. Now, there are some instances where that is what it is. The parents were severely neglectful. The parents were really abusive. The parents were really destructive, and that's what caused harm to the child. And anything that the kid did, basically, it was like they were the scapegoat, or they were the whipping boy or girl. But that's not what I'm talking about today. What I'm talking about is those kids like me in those families where the kid is struggling, or the kid just needed extra help that the parents weren't really able to give, or they didn't understand what was going on, and the kid was left feeling so broken and defective. That was my experience. I grew up as a kid who really struggled with their mental health, and growing up in an Arab family, nobody talked about that. It wasn't this really understood thing that mental health is a significant factor in children or in adults. It was basically you're acting good or you're acting bad, and anything else is just it's not talked about, it's not discussed, because there wasn't really an awareness of it. So I grew up in a family where I really had a hard time, and my family wasn't perfect by any stretch. They had their issues too. And it compounded it. It made it so much worse because they had their challenges and I had mine, and my challenges kind of just highlighted everything. So I grew up as a kid who really struggled with my emotions. I didn't really feel like I belonged. I had really severe depression from a young age. I had a really hard time forming relationships or having a strong sense of identity or feeling like I mattered. Because I didn't feel like I mattered. I didn't feel like there was a place for me. And growing up in a Middle Eastern household, there was all of these really rigid beliefs and expectations of what a young girl was supposed to be. And I didn't believe in them. I didn't agree. That's not who I wanted to be. And so you mix that with me feeling like I'm not my own person, I'm not wanted here, I'm not loved. I really struggled. I caused, quote unquote, a lot of problems. I was very vocal. I was defiant. I was really emotional, and that emotion, which never really got addressed in the way that I needed it. It was never like, and again, my parents just didn't know to do this, but they didn't sit me down and try to understand what was going on. It was just like, you're being bad, you need to stop doing this. Or they'd try to fix external things thinking that it would make it better. And all it did was make it worse. It made me feel more alone. I felt like no matter what I did, I was causing so much pain and so much misery to my family. It was like, you're too loud, you're too violent, you're too aggressive, you're crying too much, you're causing problems. Why can't you just listen to us? Why can't you just do what we want you to do? And again, because they didn't have a really big understanding of mental health, they didn't understand what was going on with me, and so they weren't able to really get me the help that I needed and get themselves the help that they needed. So I grew up as a kid developing beliefs that I'm really bad, that I'm defective and unlovable, that I'm a problem that needs to be fixed, that if I was just good enough, that if I was just perfect enough, as if that was actually a thing. But if only I was perfect enough, then I would be loved. Then they would want me for who I was. Then they wouldn't get so mad at me when I tried to be my own person. I really believed that there was something inherently broken in me, and that I was the reason my family was struggling so badly. And when you're a kid who grows up in that, when you're a kid growing up sincerely believing that you're the problem, what ends up happening and what I ended up doing was a few things. Number one, it started off with anger. I felt these really big emotions, and I didn't know how to get them out, and I didn't know what was going on, and all I knew was, I don't feel good, I feel sad, I feel lonely. And that sadness ended up turning into anger. And as a young child, that anger turned to violence, and I've seen a lot of people struggle with this. They don't know what their feelings actually are, but they just feel so intense, it ends up coming out as anger and violence. That's what happened to me at a super young age. That violence and that anger made the problems even worse, and so what did I do? I internalized that anger. I started hurting myself at a really young age. I started engaging in some really not great behaviors, really hurting myself and getting involved in things that I really shouldn't have, and with people that I really shouldn't have, because I believed something was wrong with me. I believed I was inherently bad and broken, and nobody was ever going to love me. So of course, number one, you fix the problem, which is hurt yourself. Or number two, and kind of number three, you run towards anyone and anything that helps you to feel like, oh, maybe that's not true, maybe I am enough. And I ended up in an abusive relationship that basically made everything worse. It basically validated all of my deepest fears and pains, that I actually was a bad, broken human being who deserved nothing. And this is the experience that almost all of my clients go through who felt as though they were the problem child. They end up going from trying to find their place in the home to feeling like they're broken and engaging in some sort of self-harming behavior. And then they try to get their validation and worth from the outside world. But what happens is they end up trying to get it from the wrong people. And those people end up just validating that even more. And that's exactly what happened to me. This didn't start to change until, honestly, I was like 25 when I finally met people who helped me to see that it wasn't that I was bad. It wasn't that I was broken. It wasn't that there was just something inherently wrong with me, but it was that I had really, really big, heavy deep emotions and feelings that nobody helped me to understand. Nobody helped me learn how to identify what the feelings were that I was feeling. Number two, to feel like it's okay for me to feel them. And then number three, how to do something about them. And when I finally learned how to do that, when I finally got to a place where it was like, oh, these are really big feelings, and these are really big beliefs that I developed about myself, and that's why I did what I did. It wasn't because I was bad. It was because I didn't understand what was going on in my brain and in my mind and in my body. And I didn't have a good model to show me what to do instead, because again, my family had no idea. They didn't grow up being taught emotional intelligence or effective communication when it comes to your feelings. So I modeled what they did, which is keep quiet or lash out. So when I finally met people who actually helped me to navigate this, to understand it, to understand what actually was going on, and I got my own therapy and I really started understanding the truth, I stopped feeling like the problem, because I finally realized I'm not the problem. I'm not bad. I'm not broken in the way that I thought that I was. I just didn't know better. And I didn't have anyone back then who could help me understand how to do better. That I was lovable as I was, and that I was enough, and that I just needed to learn how to navigate these things and how to process and recognize what I'm feeling, and that I'll still be loved for that. So if you're watching this, and if this is you, you're not a problem. It was never that you were bad. It was never that you were broken. It was never that there was something inherently wrong with you. The truth is, you probably didn't have people in your life who helped you to feel loved and accepted and wanted for who you were. Not because they're bad people, not because they're evil, but because they didn't know better. Now, that doesn't make it okay, but it does help you to understand why it happened the way that it did, so that you hopefully can do what I did and what worked for me and what I help my clients do, which is to understand that that younger version of you that's still in there, it's not bad and it's not broken. It's a part that feels broken. And once that part feels like it's lovable and like it's wanted and that everything is going to be okay, you can actually start to help it heal. If this is something that you don't feel like you can do on your own, because honestly, people can't do this on their own, please reach out. You can DM me, Evolve with Bianca on Instagram. Put a message here in the comments if this resonated with you or what your experience has been like. You can go to my website, evolveventurestech.com, and there's a bunch of resources there, and you can reach out to me there. If you were the problem child, you were not a problem. You were a struggling child who didn't know how to navigate the big thoughts and feelings that you were having, and it doesn't make you broken, and it doesn't mean that you're going to be broken for the rest of your life. These things can be worked on, and I was able to do it, so I know you can too.